Real wives don't carry guns. My mother-in-law said it the way she said most things at that table, loudly enough for everyone to hear, quietly enough to pretend it was just between us. She was cutting into her turkey when she said it, not even looking at me. Like the sentence cost her nothing. Behind her, mounted above the sideboard the way it had been for as long as I'd known this family. The television was playing the evening news on mute. Nobody ever watched it. It was just noise nobody had bothered to turn off. I didn't answer her right away. I never did. 14 years of Thanksgivings had taught me that Carol Ashford's comments went down easier if you let them sit for a second. The way you let a bad wine breathe before deciding it isn't worth finishing. I don't carry a gun because I'm a wife, Carol, I said finally. I carry one because of what I did before I was. She waved her fork like she was swatting the sentence out of the air. Well, that's all in the past now, isn't it? You're a mother, a homemaker. There's no need to keep playing soldier. I felt my husband, Mark, go very still beside me. He'd stopped defending me at that table years ago, not because he agreed with his mother, but because he'd learned, the same as I had, that defending me only made her dig in harder. It was easier, he decided, to let the comments land and clean up the silence afterward. I was about to answer her. I don't remember exactly what I was going to say when the woman across the table, Carol's sister, made a small sound. Not a word. Just a sharp little intake of breath, the kind you make when you recognize something before your brain has caught up to why. She was looking past me. At the television, I turned. The evening news had cut to a segment. No sound, just captions scrolling along the bottom of the screen, the kind of local human interest peace stations run during the holidays. A photograph filled half the frame. Desert camouflage. A woman in the center of 6 exhausted-looking Marines. Dust on every face, a flag half visible behind them dotted. Took me a second longer. Then it should have to recognize myself, Carol's sister, read the caption out loud before anyone could stop. Her, local veteran credited with saving unit during 2007 ambush to be honored at county ceremony this weekend. The table went silent. Carol set down her fork. That's not possible, she said. I looked at her, and for the first time in 14 years, I didn't feel the urge to make the moment easier for her. It's very possible, Carol, I said. You've just never asked. 18 years earlier, my name is Sarah Ashford, Sarah Delgado, before I married into this family. Which is a detail that matters more than you'd think, because for 14 years, almost nobody at that Thanksgiving table knew that name at all. I enlisted at 19, against my father's wishes and with my mother's quiet, unspoken pride. 4 years active duty, combat arms support, to deployments to Iraq, the second of which ended with a Bronze Star I keep in a drawer I don't open very often. I don't say that to impress anyone. I say it because it's true, and because for a very long time, almost no one in my adult life knew it. I met Mark 2 years after I got out. By then, I'd traded desert boots for an accounting degree, traded a rifle for a car I could actually afford, and I'd made a decision, half conscious at the time, fully conscious later, to stop leading with my service when I introduced myself, partly because civilian life doesn't always know what to do with that information, partly because I was tired of being the veteran before I got to be anything else. Mostly, if I'm honest, because Mark's world was so completely different from the one I'd come out of, and some quiet, self-protective part of me didn't want to bring that world into this one. Until I understood how it would be received, I found out how it would be received the first Thanksgiving I spent with his family. Carol Ashford had strong opinions about almost everything. but her strongest ones were reserved for what a wife was supposed to be. She'd been a Navy wife herself. Decades earlier, her late husband had served 20 years, and somewhere in that experience she'd built an entire philosophy about the proper distance between women and military life. Wives supported. Wives waited. Wives did not deploy, did not carry weapons, did not come home with medals in a drawer. That had been her role, and she'd built real dignity out of it. And I think, looking back, that my existence quietly threatened the shape of that dignity without my ever intending to. I didn't correct the record that first Thanksgiving. Mark introduced me as an accountant, which was true, and Carol asked what firm, and I told her, and that was that. I told myself I was being private, not dishonest. There's a difference, though it gets harder to see the longer you maintain it. By the third Thanksgiving, the omission had calcified into something like a lie by architecture, not something I'd said, but something I'd built around, room by room, year by year, until there was no natural doorway left to walk the truth through. Asterisk. Carol's comments started small and stayed small for a long time, the way most long-running family dynamics do. A remark about how career women always seemed a little tense. A comment about how she didn't know how modern wives did it all, delivered in a tone that made clear she didn't think they were doing it well. When I bought a handgun for home protection, 2 years into the marriage, a decision that had nothing to do with my service and everything to do with a string of break-ins in our neighborhood, Carol found out and treated it like a diagnosis. Guns in the house, she said. At the next family dinner, to no one in particular. I just don't understand why a young mother would want that energy around her children. I remember looking at Mark. I remember him looking at his plate. I could have told her, in that moment, exactly why a young mother might want that particular kind of competence around her children. I could have told her about the 2 deployments, the ambush in Ramadi that earned me the medal in the drawer, the 11 months I spent as the only woman in a support unit that got shot at more than the recruiters had advertised. I could have told her that I understood the weight of a firearm in a house with children in it better than almost anyone at that table. Precisely because I'd spent years understanding the weight of one in places where children sometimes were too. I didn't say any of it. I said something about wanting to feel safe, and I let her look satisfied that she'd made her point. And I went home that night and cried in the car for longer than I want to admit. Not because she'd hurt me, but because I'd let her. Over the years, the comments accumulated the way sediment does, invisible in any single layer. Undeniable once you finally look at the whole formation. Real Wives Don't Carry Guns wasn't really about the gun. It was the latest entry in a philosophy Carol had been building for 14 years. One where my quietness had been read as confirmation of everything she already believed about what kind of woman I was. I want to be fair to her, even now. Carol wasn't cruel in the way a stranger is cruel. She loved her son. She believed, genuinely, that she was protecting some version of family order she'd spent her whole adult life constructing. She wasn't attacking me so much as defending a shape of the world that had made sense to her for 60 years. That doesn't make the comments hurt less. It just makes them easier to understand, which is not the same thing as easier to forgive. Mark and I had the same argument, in different words every year, usually in the car on the drive home. She doesn't mean it the way it sounds, he'd say. She's from a different generation, and I'd say, that's not an excuse. That's a reason, and reasons don't require me to sit there and take it. We never resolved it. We just got quieter about disagreeing. Which I've since learned is what a lot of marriages do instead of actually resolving things. What I never told him, what I barely admitted to myself, was that some part of me had started to agree with the silence. 14 years is a long time to not say a true thing out loud. Eventually, the not saying starts to feel like the truth itself. The ceremony that aired on the news that Thanksgiving had nothing to do with any of this, at least not on purpose. The county had been organizing a series of recognitions for local veterans connected to a specific unit history project, nothing I'd sought out. Nothing I'd have volunteered for if a former squad mate, a woman named Renee Alvarez, hadn't tracked me down 8 months earlier and asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed for it. I almost said no. I told her honestly that I'd built a life where that part of me mostly stayed folded up in a drawer, and I wasn't sure I wanted to unfold it in front of a camera. That's exactly why you should, Renee said. You know how many women in that unit still don't tell anyone what they did. We did the job. We don't have to also do the job of convincing people it happened. I thought about that sentence for a long time before I agreed. The interview took an afternoon. I told the story the way I remembered it, the ambush, the 20 minutes where things could have gone very differently, the decisions I made because there wasn't time to make them any other way. I didn't think about who might be watching when it aired. I certainly didn't think about a muted television over a sideboard at my mother-in-law's Thanksgiving table. Some things arrive at exactly the moment they were always going to arrive at, whether you planned it or not, back at the table. The silence after Carol's sister read the caption stretched long enough that I could hear the second hand on the kitchen clock. That's not possible, Carol said again. Quieter this time, like she was trying the sentence on to see if it fit better the second time. It didn't. It's very possible, I told her. It's just something I stopped mentioning, because every time it came up, you had an opinion about what kind of woman does that kind of work. I got tired of hearing it. Carol's face did something I genuinely never seen it do in 14 years. It went uncertain. Not angry, not defensive. Uncertain, the way a person's face goes when a fact they've been building an entire worldview around turns out to be structurally wrong. You were a soldier, she said. Not a question. A fact she was still assembling in real time. I was a specialist, I said. Combat support. 2 deployments. There's a medal in a drawer at home I've taken out maybe 6 times in 14 years. Mostly to show it to Mark once, right after we got engaged. And then I put it away because I didn't think this family had room for it. I would have Carol started. You would have what? I asked, not sharp. Genuinely curious. Told me real wives don't carry medals either. She didn't have an answer for that. For the first time at that table in 14 years. Carol Ashford didn't have anything to say at all. The rest of that Thanksgiving was quiet in a way that felt different from the usual holiday quiet, not tense exactly. Just recalibrating, the whole table silently refiling information it had organized wrong for over a decade. Mark's hand found mine under the table at some point, and he squeezed it in a way that told me he understood, finally, what 14 years of my silence had actually cost. Carol didn't apologize that night. People like Carol rarely do it on the spot. This sentence has to travel through some internal process first, get worn down by reflection the way water wears down stone. But she called me 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, out of nowhere. I watched the whole segment again, she said. Renee Alvarez was interviewed too. She said you carried a wounded soldier almost half a mile under fire. I did. I said. There was a long pause on the line. I said a very stupid thing at that table, Carol said finally. For a very long time, actually. Not just that day, you did. I agreed. I wasn't going to make it smaller than it was. Not this time. I don't have a good excuse, she said. I think I built an idea of what a good wife looked like a long time ago. and I never let it grow. And it was easier to assume you fit somewhere beneath it than to ask you a single question about who you actually were. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo 14 Thanksgivings of small comments, and I told her that, gently, because I decided somewhere in the last 2 weeks that gentle and honest weren't mutually exclusive anymore. I know, she said. I'd like to do better. If you'll let me, the county ceremony happened that following spring. I almost didn't invite Mark's family. In the end, I did, mostly because Mark asked me to, and partly because some quiet, healing part of me wanted to see if Carol would actually show up for the version of me she'd spent 14 years dismissing. She came. She sat in the second row, next to Mark, in a navy blue dress. And when they called my name and read the citation out loud, the ambush, the 20 minutes, the soldier I got back to the medic in time, I watched her from the small stage. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't performing composure for her benefit. I was just standing there, being exactly who I'd always been. Afterward, she found me near the refreshment table, the way people do at these things, holding a small plate of food she wasn't eating. "I'm proud of you," she said. I should have said that a long time ago, about a lot of things. "Thank you," I told her. And then, because I meant it, it's not too late to start. She's tried since then. Not perfectly, old philosophies don't dismantle themselves in a season. And every few months there's still a comment that lands wrong, an old reflex surfacing before she can catch it. But she catches it faster now. Last Thanksgiving, when someone new to the family asked what I did before I got married, Carol answered before I could. "He served to tour overseas," she said. "Saved a man's life under fire." She's the toughest person at this table, and don't you forget it. I didn't correct her. For once. She'd gotten it exactly right. If you've ever folded a part of yourself away because you were tired of defending it to people who should have simply asked, I hope this reminds you that the folding isn't required. The truth doesn't need your permission to be true. It just needs a moment, sometimes an unplanned one, to finally be seen. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who's been underestimated by the people closest to them. And if you'd like more stories about quiet strength, hard-won respect, and the truth finally getting its turn to speak, I'd be glad if you join me again. The end.